Hello, everybody. Welcome to the session on that we have with David Fallarme, the head of HubSpot Asia marketing. And I don't think he needs a lot of introductions, to be very honest. But for the ones who don't know, David leads the marketing efforts for HubSpot's Asian market. During his time with Electronic Arts, if you guys didn't know, he actually did work for EA. He's led the customer acquisition for several video games with about millions of users. GG on that one, man. David is also the founder of APAC Marketers Roundtable, a thriving community for marketers and growth leaders in Asia. For us today, he's going to be discussing how to build a $100 million company with this customer acquisition strategy. What is this? You're curious too? Well, let's find out. David, the stage is yours.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Rob, for having me. So this presentation today is really about our experiences from HubSpot and how we grew to $100 million. But also taking a look at other startups and their journey on how they got to this scale. So I'll present today a framework that is going to be very useful for those of you in the early stages of trying to figure out what the right customer acquisition strategy is that you should focus on. And then for those of you who've already found some scale, it's going to allow you to figure out what the next one could be or how to make sure that your engine is getting more and more refined. All right. So we are going to get started right now. All right, so how to scale your customer acquisition strategy. So this is me. You already know my intro. So if you want to follow me in the socials, this is how to find me, where I post a lot more stuff around marketing and marketing frameworks. But okay, today's objective and the session's objective is to really get you to this place. Repeatable, predictable acquisition channels. You know, the dream of any SaaS company is you know exactly where to invest $1. And after you invest that $1, $1.25 comes out, $2 comes out, $10 comes out. So you know exactly where to invest, and so that it's a repeatable, predictable acquisition strategy that you have, because that's what's going to take you to $100 million. So it sounds simple, right? Like very obvious. Of course, this is what everybody wants to do. The problem is, as you all know, there's so many best practices on the internet, and it's very confusing where to begin. You know, somebody will say, you should really start a blog. You should do content marketing. Oh, actually, what you need is to master Facebook ads. And then somebody's going to say, actually, what the thing to do is scale your sales team, sales acceleration, sales automation. That's what you need to do. Then on a podcast you're listening to, somebody says, growth hacking is the way to do this, and here's how this company did it. Then somebody else is going to say, hey, you know, you've heard so many advice on the internet. But the problem is, if you don't know which one is relevant to you, then you're just going to get stuck, right? Because what these all are tactics. These are all tactics. And you need to think one level up to get to a predictable, repeatable system. You need to think in flywheels, not just tactics, but one level up to the flywheels. Okay, flywheels is something that we've oriented ourselves around at HubSpot. So a flywheel is essentially, think of it as one system connects to the other. And that thing that connects to another thing, once all those things go into a very nice, repeatable motion, then you can have a very nice process that allows you to grow much more sustainably and much more scalably. So for us, what we're trying to grow is customers. That's why it's in the center. And then most of you know that we have a marketing product. Some of you know that we also have a CRM platform. So the growth of our marketing product enables people to get a lot of leads to their company. Now that you have a lot of leads, you need a sales product to manage all those leads. And then we also have the services product. So now you have all these customers, you need to service them. And then now we have a service product to offer you. So this is just how we think about flywheels. Every part is connected to each other, and we know exactly what we're going to focus on, right? So that's a high-level introduction of what a flywheel looks like. So if we bring it back to how scaling is supposed to work in a SaaS company, your first job as a marketing leader, as a founder, as a sales leader in the company is to pick the right flywheel. Okay, pick the right flywheel for your company. And again, so many best practices on the internet, this is still confusing. Should you be doing a sales flywheel? Should you be doing a social flywheel? Content marketing, word of mouth? Which one do you focus on, right? So your first job is to make sure you're picking the right flywheel. So here's a framework that is going to allow you to figure out which one is the right flywheel for you to focus on. Okay, on the left is average revenue per customer, and think about this in terms of very like high level per year, annual revenue per customer. And on the bottom is the number of customers in that potential target market, or what is the number of people who you could acquire. So think about it as like the total addressable market for that customer segment, because then you can start to plot out different kinds of business models using this framework: average revenue and number of customers potentially in that market segment. Okay, so you have to start from the business model. You always have to start from the business model. And the way we think about it here is think about what kind of animal you're hunting. Are you hunting elephants? Think of this as like you're selling to governments, right? There's not a lot of governments out there, but when you have a contract with them, it's probably going to be quite big. Or you're selling to a giant company like IBM, as an example, or Tata Motors or something like that, right? Something huge where it's going to take you probably a long time to close them, but once you do get them, then it's going to be a very big part of your business. And you can keep scaling this down. So now we have elephants, we have buffalo, we have rabbits, we have mice, and we have worms, right? So it depends on the kind of business model you think your business applies to. So everybody in this room can probably identify which animal they're hunting. Are you going after the SMB sector? Are you going after the enterprise? And that allows you to figure out what your business model is. Because what we layer on top of this animal analogy is a hunting analogy, all right? So if you're hunting governments, really huge enterprises, then you need to be using spears, right? You're going to be hunting in groups of people, very specialized techniques, very specialized tools, probably takes a long time. But once you can get them, then it's going to feed you for a long time. If you are hunting this set of animals, then you might be able to use spears, but it's probably going to be inefficient, right? In most cases, you'll most likely be using nets where you're trying to get animals at scale. You're hunting at scale. You're trying to get a lot of them at once. So it's not so specialized, but you can get a bigger group of these animals when you're hunting them. Down here, you're probably still going to be able to use nets. But what is interesting at this bottom part is, if imagine you're like a Facebook, imagine you are WhatsApp. You're not going to be getting users by cold calling or writing really nice blog posts, but instead you're going to be throwing seeds on the ground. You're going to be doing a lot of stuff. Some of it is not going to go anywhere, but the stuff that does land is going to grow into these huge gardens or these huge trees where you can get a lot of worms for your business. All right. So this is a very helpful analogy in trying to figure out what the right flywheel is for your business. Are you hunting really large corporations that are going to take a long sales cycle to win them over, and you need specialized sales teams doing a very regimented process? Are you hunting rabbits where maybe there's a lot of them? It doesn't make sense for you to be focusing on them with sales teams, but maybe you're using customer acquisition strategies that allow you to reach them at scale. Or maybe you're all the way down to the worms. Maybe you're selling a viral product. Maybe it's a banking product that's meant to be used by millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. You're not going to acquire users by going door to door, right? Like, or by writing nice blog posts. You'll be doing something different. And so that's what we'll be talking about today. And this is just a recap of the different models. So the takeaway from this slide is to find the right flywheel, to find the right acquisition strategy for your business, you first have to identify what the right animal you're hunting is, and then figure out what the right acquisition strategy is. So if we start to make this now more into concrete marketing terms, if you're hunting huge enterprises, it's going to be a sales motion. If you're going to be hunting mid-market to SMB, it's likely going to be heavily on content, heavily on pay-per-click and paid advertising. And then at the bottom end, you're going to be heavily driven by word of mouth. All right. So at this point, using my animal analogy, you should have been able to figure out what the right flywheel is for your business. So that's going to help you narrow down all those best practices you see on the internet. But that's not the only thing you have to do. There's a second part to this. So you now know the right flywheel. The most important part in building a repeatable, predictable acquisition machine is you know how the flywheel works. So it's not enough to know that you need to be doing sales, because some of you are already doing that. You're like, I know I need to go after the big companies, and so I must have a sales team, but for some reason it's not working. Or I know I need to be building a content marketing machine for my company, but it's not working. What's happening? So you've done the first part, right, congratulations. But the second part, if it's not working, this is the section where we'll tell you how to diagnose that. Okay, so I'm assuming since we're at a SaaS virtual event, a lot of you are probably in B2B SaaS. And so probably a lot of you are trying to get this sales motion to work, right? So here's how it's supposed to work. Here's what a healthy sales flywheel looks like. And I'll show you how to do that. But before we do that, we need to talk about what a bad flywheel looks like. A bad flywheel is one that doesn't work. That's because this is the kind of conversations that you hear in companies where the flywheel is not working. My sales reps just aren't closing enough deals. I, the VP sales, I, the head of sales, I, the founder, I still need to get involved in every call to make sure that we close deals. If you are hearing this, or if you're reading this on Slack or email in your company, then you have a bad flywheel. And that's because your flywheel looks like this. There's something like, I need to hire a bunch of sales reps, okay? But once I hire them, I don't know what to do. They do something. Then they like make money somehow. I have a bunch of sales reps on the team. They somehow make money. Then something happens and I have no idea. So as you can see, in contrast to some of the flywheels we saw before where it's a very connected circle, this is a bad flywheel because it's not connected. It doesn't feed onto itself. And this is why you hear those conversations like, I need to get involved in every call because the sales team isn't working. In contrast, good flywheel, a company who's figured out how to do sales at scale that is repeatable, this is the kind of conversation you will hear. Our lead to close rate is 5%. We have 20 deals in play this month. We are starting to get good leads from Indonesia. So these are just 3 short sentences, but they reveal a lot about the company that is saying these things in their Slack teams, in their email, or in their Zoom meetings doing a review on their pipeline, right? They know their lead to close rate, so they have a predictable pipeline. They know what their opportunity is coming up, and they have an idea of where the next regions are that they need to focus on. And that's because their flywheel, in contrast to the first one, looks something like this. Hire a bunch of sales reps. Those reps predictably close some number of deals. And now that they've closed some deals, they have some revenue, and the revenue funds lead generation. The lead generation allows you to fuel your next version of expansion. It's a new market, a new vertical. And now that you can expand, then you hire more sales reps, right? Very, very different. It feeds into each other. And now you have an idea of how to spin that flywheel faster and how to get more growth out of your sales machine. Okay, now we can make sense of all those best practices we see on the internet about how to do prospecting, how to close deals. Because if you've identified that this is an important part of how you're going to grow your business, and now you know what a good flywheel looks like, you can actually start to pinpoint where you need help on this flywheel. Is it the hiring part? Is it the closing deals part? Is it the lead gen part? And now you can start to diagnose what needs improvement and where you need to accelerate. A few best practices I want to highlight here, the parts where people usually trip up when building a sales flywheel. First is prospecting. So now if you've identified that this is something that you need to focus on in your company, you need to get really good at prospecting. What that means is finding who the target audience is and getting in touch with them, and then booking meetings with them, right? Pipeline X-ray. So this means as a sales manager or as a sales leader, you need to be able to look at your sales team and understand exactly what's happening, who's got what deals closing, who is likely to hit quota this month, this quarter, this year, because you need that visibility if you're going to make it predictable. And then have an inbound engine to make sure that you're fueling that next layer of expansion, right? So just here's a few examples of how we do this at HubSpot. We allow our reps to, we allow the prospects of our reps to book time with them. I'm sure a lot of you have seen a version of this, whether it's HubSpot, whether it's your own practices, but this is an important part of making sure you have a sales flywheel that's predictable, because there's still so many companies that do meeting bookings via WhatsApp or via email where it's not trackable, it's not predictable. So if you have the opportunity to build this into your process, we highly, highly encourage it. Not only is it important for the sales rep to make sure that the calendar invite is sent to the prospect, but from the sales manager as well, it's easier for them to understand this rep has X number of meetings this week, this other rep has Y number of meetings this week. If all of that is happening through WhatsApp or through emails, it's very hard for the manager to manage the process. Sales pipeline. So this is a screenshot, I think, from on one of our own teams, where you can see what the progression in the pipeline is. So this many deals were created, this amount of negotiation steps, and then this number of deals were waiting to be booked for revenue, right? So at the very least, have an idea of what the conversion steps are between your funnel, because that's going to allow you to identify what needs to improve, where things are broken, and where your attention is most deserved. All right, so a recap of a bad flywheel looks like this because it says that I need to hire a bunch of sales reps, something magical happens and I make money, and then something else happens, right? So how do you go from bad flywheel to a good flywheel? You have to make sure there's a focus on driving meetings. One of the ways to do that is to have a meeting booking tool or just having some kind of email tracking software to know as a sales manager that you are able to drive meetings predictably. You have to be using a CRM to understand your pipeline. I think most of you are probably already doing this. I would say add on the additional layer of using the CRM, not just a place to track all of the customer information, but to use it to understand the pipeline and really hold your sales teams accountable to making sure that they are improving month on month, quarter on quarter. And then generating leads with inbound marketing. Please do not live in a world where you have to buy email databases and then like blast emails to them. Less and less successful, I think, is the future for that type of tactic. And so the companies that are already getting started with inbound marketing, whether it's blog posts, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's social media, creating an engine so that people are reaching out to you as opposed to you having to cold contact everyone is going to serve your sales team in the long run. And then that's going to allow you to build a flywheel that looks like this, where you hire sales reps, those reps close a predictable amount of deals. Now that you're closing a certain amount of revenue, you can fund lead generation, which then funds future expansion. And that's it. So this is one of the flywheels that companies like Salesforce use to get to $100 million. They just did this over and over and over. HubSpot used versions of this to get to $100 million. And so there's a lot of companies, if you are identifying your business, the target of your business model to be larger corporations, governments, then you need to be having a healthy sales flywheel to drive the growth of your business. All right, so let's say you are not driven by sales. Let's say that you are driven by these types of animals that you're hunting, not quite huge enterprises or big companies, but SMBs, mid-market companies, maybe in the 50 to 1,000 company size. It doesn't always make sense, especially if your price point is a certain amount that you're going to use sales reps to drive your growth. So then you need to rely on something like content, right? So content. Here is what a bad content flywheel looks like. Looks like this. This is what it sounds like in those Slack teams where a flywheel for content isn't quite working, and it's very frustrating. Hey, we publish 2 blog posts a week, but we're not getting any traffic. Does this content thing really work? Is this supposed to be how it's working? And that's because the flywheel looks like this. Publish a bunch of blog posts. Then some magical things happen, and I think we get traffic somehow off the back of that. And I don't know, then we just keep publishing blog posts, right? So that's what happens. And I know that a lot of us have been down this path where you see something like this in Google Analytics, and it just hurts, right? It just hurts. I actually know a company that used to publish 20 blog posts per week. They just hired a bunch of freelancers, they hired a bunch of interns and writers and just published blog posts, and their Google Analytics looked something like this. And it didn't make any sense to them because somebody told them at some point, you should just keep blogging and good things will happen. So that's true sometimes, but most of the time, this is what happens when you don't have a structure around it. In contrast, good flywheel looks like this. This is what you hear in a company where a content flywheel is working well. If we create content on this topic, we could probably get 5,000 visitors this month. So our 1% leads conversion rate, conversion to lead rate should hold up. So this is very indicative of a company that has figured out how to make a predictable, repeatable acquisition strategy out of content. Because this is what their flywheel looks like. There's strategic content creation before they even publish content. So before they say, I'm going to do a bunch of blog posts, they actually first plan out what topic they're going to use, what the importance of each content is. And after they do that, they promote the content. It's not enough just to hit publish. You actually have to do a bunch of work to promote it. Once you promote the content, then you get traffic. After you get traffic, you convert some number of leads. Then you're going to close some percentage of those leads into revenue, which allows you to increase your content budget, which then allows you to strategically create more content in the future. All right, very, very different from what you saw in the first part. And now we can make sense of all those best practices on the internet around how to blog, how to do SEO, why you should be starting on YouTube, why you need to be doing Clubhouse. Like, it doesn't necessarily all make sense to do that. So you first have to figure out that a content strategy is right for you. Then you identify where on the flywheel you're weak. Then you can identify where you can make sense of all those best practices. So 2 things where most companies fall apart. Estimating the traffic opportunity and measuring conversion. The traffic opportunity, once you actually start doing content and SEO, it's such a no-brainer for you to think of this as the first step, but it's tragic that a lot of companies don't. So estimating traffic opportunity means you use a tool like Ahrefs or SEMrush to figure out the topic that you want to write about. How hard is it to actually get traffic from those searches? How many people are actually searching for this topic? And is it worth my time, and is it worth my team's time to create content around this and to own this topic, right? So you can see in this case, the word CRM is something that we HubSpot care a lot about because we have a CRM platform. And so we can see it's very hard to rank for this keyword because tons of companies predictably also want to rank for CRM, and there's a lot of well-resourced companies that do this, and the search volume is not that high. So maybe if you want to compete with HubSpot or other companies, this is probably not the best keyword to compete on. You probably want to find other things to write about, okay? And then lead conversion. So this is a screenshot from within HubSpot. This is what we use to figure out what types of content you should create next, in addition to estimating the traffic opportunity. Look closely at the screenshot, okay? Not only do you see the number of sessions or number of visits for each topic that we create, so we group our blog posts into topics, which we call topic clusters. We measure the number of sessions each topic cluster gets. We can also see the conversion rate of that topic into contacts. Okay, so what's the conversion of contacts from that specific topic cluster, and then the number of customers you get at the end of it. So it's very important that you don't just create content for the sake of getting traffic. Don't forget, at the end of the day, the reason you're doing that is to get leads, which means you get customers. So you have to be measuring this in some form. I personally found this very difficult to do outside of a CRM platform. I think you can do some version of it in Google Analytics where you do like event tracking, but it's hard to tie up this customers thing into Google Analytics because they have to push data into it. So use a CRM platform that allows you to track your content funnel all the way down through customers, and that's going to allow you to spin up your content flywheel much faster. Okay, write a bunch of blog posts. This is what a bad flywheel looks like. How you fix that is to choose a topic, think about the SEO tools, and then measure the lead to conversion rate. And this what a good flywheel looks like in contrast. All right, very, very different. It's not hard to go from the bad flywheel to the good flywheel. It just takes a lot of effort and for you to really rethink how content works within your company. Okay. We're going to do one more section here. I think we're not going to have the time to do word of mouth, but we'll do pay-per-click just because a lot of companies also use this as a growth model. So let's do this one quickly and then we'll go to Q&A. So bad flywheel sounds like this. We spent a bunch of money on Facebook ads. I don't know. I think you're doing okay. I'm not really sure. So your flywheel looks something like this. Spend a bunch of money on Facebook and I don't know, like get sales. And I don't know. Nobody's happy when this happens. In fact, there's only one person who's happy and it's this guy. And yeah, we don't need to give him more money. He's got enough money. Okay, contrast that with a good flywheel. Looks like this. Very, very different. What you hear in the Slack team or the email chains of a company that's got pay-per-click performance marketing flywheel figured out. They know the cost per acquisition, they know what their limit is, and they know what happens to their cost per acquisition when they increase their spend. So they have a very good idea of how the dynamics change. So spend money on ads, get leads and sales. Once you do that, you identify which campaigns are worth investing in further, which then forces you to update those campaigns, which makes you optimize your spend. And then now you can spend more money with more conviction and with more confidence. So that's a very different flywheel than what you saw before, which is I'm just going to get a bunch of Facebook ads live and just hope they have some kind of downstream effect. It's very, very big difference when you see a company with a good flywheel because it's much more measured and much more quantified, right? So the keys here, set a target cost per acquisition, test a lot of different audiences and optimize your ads. Okay, one quick thing about how we do this at HubSpot, and you don't have to do it this way because there's different ways to report on it, right? But this is what we see and how we're able to find so much success on paid social advertising. It's because when we run campaigns, we can see not just the number of leads that we converted, but all the way down through the ROI because we have the customer revenue data within our CRM. So we connect all of that together. If you do this just with Facebook, you're probably going to stop just at the leads portion for most B2B businesses. I think with e-commerce, you can't get to the ROI section. But with B2B businesses, it's a little trickier to get to the ROI calculation. But this is a very important part of how you scale up a pay-per-click flywheel. Okay? Bad flywheel looks like this. So you very easy fix. by just setting up full funnel, making sure you're obsessing over audiences and not ads. And a good flywheel looks like this. So this is the paid acquisition strategy that's fueled a ton of companies. Think about like domain registration. Think about anybody who uses paid acquisition as a big lever. So gaming companies use this. And when we used gaming, when we used paid acquisition at Electronic Arts, my video game old company, then it was a huge part of how we were able to grow a lot of companies, a lot of games to the $1 million revenue point and millions of users. All right, we're going to do some Q&A, but we're going to skip the word of mouth section just because we're at time. But if you add me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I'll make sure that you have more insights so you have the full rundown. Okay, sorry, we're going to skip this. Yes, you're going to get this later. Just add me on socials. Yep. And then we'll get to it. Cool. All right, let me just skip to the end, and then we'll get to the Q&A. I think Raghav is probably going to help me out.
Yeah, for sure. So David, firstly, thank you so much for that brilliant session. I did really hope that we had a little bit more time to have you take us through the whole thing, because that entire flywheel setup, that was mad. But essentially, just jumping in real quick to the Q&A session, just checking in. One question that we have that's been voted the most says, most SMB owners do not serve to attract them with blog posts. What is a good strategy to acquire, say, salon owners or restaurant owners as customers? And what would the flywheel look like?
Great question. So I have a couple of friends who run companies that are going after restaurant owners. And you're probably right. They're not going to go after blog posts. But the thing is, everybody's on Instagram. Everybody's on Facebook. So content doesn't mean write blog posts, right? Content just means use produced assets to get in front of your audience at scale. So how they do it, and they're salon owners or restaurant owners, is everybody's on Facebook. So they run Facebook ads, or they have a very good social strategy on Instagram. So takeaway, content doesn't mean blog. It just means assets that you create to get in front of your customers on whatever media they're using to consume content.
Brilliant stuff, David. Thank you so much for that. And with that, guys, we're going to be calling it an end on today's session with David. As always, tweet your questions straight to David at LinkedIn or Twitter, or just tag the SaaS Insider handle when you're tweeting out your questions. We'll make sure that we have David answering as many of them as possible. Thanks again for your time. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.